Well, I heard a story once of a traveling circuit preacher who was doing an evangelistic outreach in a small town, and he was pouring out his heart on the subject of heaven, and right in the middle of his message, he says, I want to know tonight, how many of you would love to go to heaven? Raise your hand if you would love to go to heaven. And every hand shot up, except for one young man sitting in the front row of the balcony. He was frowning as he kept his hands stuffed strictly in his pockets. And the preacher noticed him, as you do when you're standing on stage and there's one person who is doing something different than everybody else that you're watching out there in the crowd. And so the preacher thought, well, maybe the young man didn't hear the question. Maybe he was daydreaming and his mind was wandering. And maybe I should try something else to get his attention. And so he said, even louder and more boldly, tonight, if you really want to go to heaven, I want you to stand up. And everyone else stood up, but that young man never moved. And so the pastor, after the service, was determined to find out why. He asked the young man, don't you want to go to heaven? Well, yeah, Pastor, of course I do. But I thought you were organizing a trip right now. And that sort of reveals for us our mindset, the mindset of our modern culture at least. We all want to go to heaven, at least we all profess to want to go to heaven, but we're not sure we want to go right now. To which I ask, why not? What in the world is keeping you in a place like this? What would keep you here? What would keep you from wanting to be in a place like what we're about to see in Revelation chapter 21? I mean, it has to be a lack of understanding of it, or if I'm theologically accurate, maybe it's a thorough understanding of our purpose, and we're not ready to give that up yet. I hope that's what it is. But from a cultural perspective, I know that it's a lack of understanding. And so today we're going to be talking about heaven. And specifically, we're going to be looking at the celestial city today. It's an incredible passage. If you've never read it before, it's an amazing passage. It is mind-blowing. It is hard to fathom. And I'll touch on some subjects, and even after I touch on them, you're going to be like, "That I don't get it. I can't imagine it." And that's true, too, because I'm still there myself. But I've been waiting to preach on this passage all year. This was actually the chapter I had in mind when I said, I want to teach on Revelation this year. But we had to get through the hard slog of doing all the work on that other stuff so that we could really appreciate what God does here in Revelation 21. So what we're going to see today is a city for everyone. A city for everyone. Now recall, we looked at this a couple of weeks ago. Jesus at the Last Supper says, I'm preparing a place for you. And he says, I am the way, I'm preparing a place for you, and it's even more than you can possibly fathom. Look at what he says in John chapter 14, verses 1 through 3. Let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. Understatement of the eternity. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come again and will take you to myself, that where I am, you may be also. Now, go back then to verse 2, and it says, in my Father's house are many rooms. Now, when you get into the Greek on this word, you go, oh, this is not what I thought it was. I thought we were going to have mansions. But the word here, strictly, if we were to define it accurately, would indicate like an apartment. Many rooms. It could even be a singular room. And so then you're like, oh, so what is this going to be like? We're all going to be staying at a La Quinta? I mean, I'm not excited about that. And that's true. Why would you be excited about that? But even though it says rooms there, we're going to look at this city and we're going to see that it's something significantly more than we have ever imagined before. Unless you have a really fantastic imagination, in which case maybe you're beyond me already, but it is so much more than that. Of course, John wrote this passage that's on the screen after watching Jesus live his life, after watching him die, after his resurrection, and after ministering in the church for a few decades. But then he gets a vision, right? And that's what we've been looking at all year long, is this vision that John gets later, late in his life. And we've been studying this all the way through this year, and we're in Revelation chapter 21. As I told you, we're going to pick up in verse 9. Then came one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls full of the seven last plagues and spoke to me, saying, "Come, I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb." Now, I know we want to get to the next verse because it's really exciting, but we got to stop there because John's doing something important here. The vision that he's getting is doing something important for us. Even though we want to get to this tour, we got to stop and look at this because this angel that appears here in verse 9 takes us all the way back then to chapter 17, because this is the same angel that helps pour out these bowl judgments. And the language that we see is almost identical. I'll put them both on the screen so that you can see them together. But in 17 verse 1 it says, "Then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and said to me, 'Come, I will show you the judgment of the great prostitute who is seated on many waters.'" So that same angel in chapter 21 is there in chapter 17, and he says, "Come, I will show you." Now, that's not accidental, right? It is intentionally bringing out a contrast that we are supposed to recognize. A contrast between the prostitute, who we've seen in the intervening chapters, if you've been here for all of these sermons, you've seen in the intervening chapters, is banished out into horrific circumstances, all right? So this is the prostitute who claims to be of God, but is not. She's an antichrist. And then it's the contrast between that and the bride of Christ, the legit bride of Christ. And who is the bride of Christ? It is made up entirely of those who have placed their faith in Christ and overcome. We have to keep that in mind as well, because that's what we looked at. I know it was a long time ago, the last time we were together, at least that I was with you doing this. But Revelation says over and over and over, and this is what we looked at a month ago, if you overcome, if you're faithful, if you conquer, is actually the more strict way to translate that word, then you will inherit, you will live, you will eat, you will reign. And the bride then is made up entirely of those who have overcome. That's who the bride is. Let's move onward. Verse 10, "And he carried me away in the Spirit to a great high mountain and showed me the holy city, Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, having the glory of God, its radiance like a most rare jewel, like a jasper, clear as crystal." So from this high vantage point that we see on this mountaintop, John sees this great city coming down out of heaven. And I imagine that it must have been kind of like, I don't know, do you remember that movie Independence Day when all those massive spaceships come and they come to rest right over all of those cities? And then, well, of course, then they zap them. But anyway, that's not going to happen. That's already happened, right? I imagine it's kind of like that, except way bigger and way more glorious than we can possibly fathom. It shines with the glory of God. It's brilliant in every way possible because of the presence of God that is in it. It is radiant, like a flawless diamond. Actually, jasper might be a diamond. We don't really know in today's culture what a jasper was that was clear. We don't have that today. It's a clear, radiant stone. So it may have been that this is a reference to a diamond. So try to picture this. John is seeing this dazzling diamond, which is the size of a city, ultimately, coming down out of heaven. It is glittering and shining with this stunning brilliance. But the scope of this city is unbelievable. Look at verse 12. "It had a great high wall with 12 gates, and at the gates 12 angels. And on the gates the names of the 12 tribes of the son of Israel were inscribed. On the east 3 gates, on the north 3 gates, on the south 3 gates, and on the west 3 gates. And the wall of the city had 12 foundations, and on them were the 12 names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb." So, you know all the jokes that go, hey, you got to the pearly gates and there was Peter. Well, there's no Peter. There's 12 gates, by the way, but no Peter mentioned. There are angels, which is nice. So here's this indication, though, what we have by these 12 gates is that this is the dwelling place of all of those who have been redeemed by faith. At the gates are the 12 tribes of Israel inscribed on every gate, indicating that this city is the eternal home of the Old Testament saints. They're there, they're present in that city. The gates are open to the Israelites. Those who, as Paul states in Romans 11, had been broken off of the vine and then grafted back in again through faith. You can study Revelation 11 on your own. They are not only welcome, but the fact that their names are inscribed on the gates means that they belong to this city. And then there's the foundations in verse 14, 12 of them. Now, keep in mind, the 12 foundations are merely under the walls of this city. And on those 12 foundations then are the 12 apostles' names inscribed on them. And I think that this indicates that not only are these apostles included, but that these walls themselves represent the boundary of the home of the redeemed, and it is resting on the testimony, on the teaching, on the example of the apostles. That's what's happening. So the boundary of who's in and who's out is all entirely based on what the apostles taught, how their example went in terms of their testimony about Jesus Christ. They represent the foundation of the walls, who's in and who's out. So it brings to mind to me what Jesus says to Peter. He says, on this rock I will build my church, right? He's not talking specifically about Peter, although certain segments of the church today think so. But I think it's saying on this testimony that I am the Christ, that I am the Son of God, that's what I'm going to build my church. I'm going to build the foundations. And on that, I'm going to build this wall. So the boundary of the outer perimeter of the greatest city that has ever existed is built on the apostles. And those who are welcome within this city are all those who live by faith in God. We looked at Hebrews 11. A month ago, whatever it was. It was forever ago. Sorry. I'm back. By the way, if there are foundations, which it says there are, that means that this holy city, this celestial city, will be physically on the new earth, not above it. Right? Foundations mean anchor points. So I take that to mean that it is present in this new earth.